I'll give it a sec, hold on. Okay.
Okay. Tonight, we present to you Michelle Shortt, our Arizona chapter head, talking about satanic feminism in the adult entertainment industry. Satanic feminism needed to be distinguished from other branches of feminism, as we shouldn't forget that in the 80s and 90s, a certain strain of virulent, regressive feminism aligned itself with the puritanical right to create a moral panic surrounding Satanists that never existed. And in a culture that still holds on to a lot of sexual repression based on the Judeo-Christian mythos, and Michelle Shortt, being a longtime model and worker in the adult entertainment industry, has had to deal with a good deal of backlash, but she's always done it with a great deal of panache. And I believe she'll have a lot to say about this beyond what I can describe in an academic sense about what justifies Satanism in the cultural environment. She puts it to practice every day in the real world. Everybody, Michelle Shortt.
Thank you for that excellent introduction, Mission. Hello, I am Michelle Shortt, the chapter head for the Arizona chapter of the Satanic Temple. I've been a self-identified Satanist since 2001 and a member of the Satanic Temple since 2014, roughly around when the Baphomet Monument was first announced to be constructed. I have 12 years of experience as an erotic entertainer and 5 years of experience as a model in the fetish and erotica segments of modeling. So tonight's lecture, I will be discussing satanic feminism in the adult entertainment industry. Sex workers use sexual liberation as a self-empowerment tool, and the implementation of what we Satanists like to call lesser magic is used to achieve the end goal, which is usually the form of monetary compensation for the rendering of services. However, satanic feminism has had a colorful history, which we will now discuss. A well-known satanic concept that we all, as Satanists, have identified with is the concept that we are our own God. We take advantage of our strengths, we revel in our accomplishments, and we also admit when we're at fault, and we take ownership of the consequences that come from that. We encourage the pursuit of knowledge as well as sexual liberation in whatever form we so choose. As opposed to, say, Christianity, where all these aspects, satanic aspects that we hold dear, they are viewed in a negative light. Sexual repression is in itself a Christian aspect that has infiltrated our culture and stunted our population's perspective into believing sex and anything associated with it to be shunned and viewed with disdain. For centuries, free-thinking and sexually liberated women, in particular, have been the victims of persecution, and many were subsequently labeled as witches. And if they were lucky, they were exiled from the community, or, as we know, as in the Salem witch trials, worse. Excuse me. Which leads me to satanic feminism within the Miltonic Romantic literature. Mary Wollstonecraft is best known for A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, published in 1792, in which she argues that women are not naturally inferior to men, but appear only to be because they lack education. She suggests that both men and women should be treated as rational beings and imagines a social order founded on reason. Wollstonecraft's advocacy of women's equality and critiques of conventional femininity became increasingly important. Today, Wollstonecraft is regarded as one of the founding feminist philosophers, and feminists often cite her life and work as important influences. Romantic women writers found a surprising range of poetic uses for Milton's Satan, the most significant being a vision of outcast female genius, hurled from the celestial sphere for having claimed equality, a satanic feminist romantic vision. Before Byron and Shelley rediscovered in Satan a conflicted Prometheanism, and long before Robert Southey's reactionary critique of the Satanic School in 1821, romantic writers found in Milton's hero surprising echoes of their own struggles. Wollstonecraft has written, "There's a degree of boldness in her conceptions and masculine energy in her style that is very imposing. There is a gloomy grandeur in her imagination, while she explores the regions of intellect without chart or compass, which gives one the idea of genius wandering through chaos." This ambivalently romantic vision of Wollstonecraft as Satan traversing through chaos, and using both scripture and reason to tempt women with equality. This marks an important point of confluence between opposing political uses of Satan as both heroic and revolutionary, as both a heroic revolutionary and a willful destroyer. So female writers, such as Wollstonecraft, go against everything what a traditional woman should stand for. In the concept of Eve, Eve is viewed as the perfect woman, innocent and subservient to Adam. And in turn, masculinity is attributed to what we see as Satan. You know, he's a tempter and lured Eve away from innocence. So this vision of satanic masculinity complements the role of fallen femininity. Both have abandoned the divine order for the false promise of liberty. So Eve was willing to give up everything for the pursuit of knowledge, and many feminists were able to relate to this. These conservative allegories of satanic temptation hint at Satan's seductiveness, political, sexual, and intellectual, in order to better serve their didactic purposes of shoring up women's resistance and redeeming Eve. Before the fall, Adam gives life to Eve, and after the fall, it is Eve who gives life to Adam, who redeems him and history and restores paradise to both. So in a sense, as I was saying, Eve is the epitome of a perfect wife, associated with motherhood and the creation of all that is man. In contrast, sex workers are seen as complete opposites. They're usually not seen as mothers. They're seen usually as objects for men to lust after. Later, I will explain how sex workers use this archaic notion to their advantage. In this model, though, distinct from the idealization of Eve, we find a romantic and feminist vision of women's poetic genius as satanic. The sign of the woman poet is satanic, especially back then, where women were discouraged from writing, reading. Women's earlier uses of Satan's rebellion to symbolize a feminist and intellectual struggle. Wollstonecraft thus implies that a woman's intellectual innocence is actually formulated in masculine terms of coercive prohibition. Innocence is actually a state of ignorance and feminine weakness. This satanic feminism was recognized as such by conservative writers who deliberately allied women's pursuit of forbidden knowledge with the fallen angel. So, as we see, Satan being the masculine form, and Eve being the innocent, the virginal type, we see a sort of dichotomy between the two. Innocence meaning virginal and evil being lustful. And therefore, the term carnal knowledge appears. Carnal knowledge meaning, anything to do with sex and the knowledge that comes with that. And so we see the pornification and sexualization of Satan. The fact that modern uses of carnal knowledge in the West carry connotations of torture and supernatural evil appears to be attributable to the transformation of pagan cosmologies at the hands of early Christian apologists. This process of creating meaningful cosmologies around narratives of sexual encounters can be seen from classical myths of sexual congress between mortals and gods to witch theory. As Walter Stevens observes, witchcraft was regarded as inherently sexual. Kramer believed that witchcraft and sexual immorality were necessary complements to each other. The Malleus Maleficarum states that sexual congress with demons is a categorical requirement for being a witch. And this is a quote from it. Mark well, too, that among other things, witches have to do 4 deeds to the increase of the perfidy. That is, to deny the Catholic faith in whole or in part through verbal sacrilege, to devote themselves body and soul to the devil, to offer up to the evil one himself infants not yet baptized, and to persist in diabolic filthiness through carnal acts with incubus and succubus demons. Note that actually casting maleficium is not a requirement, but intercourse with demons is. Despite the fact that these theologians saw sex as sinful, erotic knowledge somehow remained the highest form of epistemology. Only by creating an archive of confessions describing copulation with demons in the physical space could the reality of demons, and therefore angels, be proved. The inquisitors were actually demonologists for whom the persecution of witches was a means to this end. The satanic connection with sex and nature gained further complexity because of Satan's historic association with the ancient gods of the woods. As Shelley called them, the pagan gods and spirits of the natural world. The identification of Satan with the old nature gods, or the great god Pan, opened up vast possibilities of association and sometimes enabled Satan to grow into a kind of universal earth god. And so this continued, this interpretation that sexuality is indicative of an evil presence. And we fast forward to the late 1980s, early 90s, and we can view that this idea that sex is inherently evil to be, for those feminist groups to fight among this idea. So one feminist group believes that porn is good and sexuality is good, and the other one believes it isn't. So the inhibition of a woman's sexual desires and erotic prowess is not inherently a feminist viewpoint, as it insinuates her body's natural urges to be sinful or exploitative of her womanly demeanor. This position that sexuality is in essence a form of abuse was adopted by early feminist groups and fueled many cases during the Satanic Panic era. We can see this in the coercion of children during the SRA cases. Formal advocacy groups like Believe the Children use methods to interrogate, or Believe the Children only believed the confessions that were obtained during the SRA cases. So the methods that were used to interrogate the children in the famous cases such as Keller or McMartin shows evident coercion methods that were used on the children in the forms of leading questions or suggestive toy plushies. Quack doctors and officials concluded that this was evidence to support satanic ritual abuse, because the children should be ignorant of such carnal knowledge. Again, innocence, being ignorant of sexuality, all ties into each other. It can be argued that the phenomenon known as the Satanic Panic is directly descended from the witch hunts of early modern Europe. The fear that society has been infiltrated by agents of Satan can be traced in America back to the Puritans. The belief in SRA, the satanic ritual abuse, that Satanists are torturing and sexually abusing children for religious purposes did not arise until the late 20th century. And while the scope of satanic conspiracy theories has no bounds, at the center there is always a sexual trauma. Frankenfurter notes that the published stories of SRA place a sexual monstrosity at the center of a tableau of evil. And as we know, SRA is allied with psychotherapy and founded on the premise that traumatic memories are repressed, up to the point where some women who were interrogated who adamantly said, "I have not been abused," were not believed because their memories must have been repressed due to the significant sexual trauma. So, we are now led to feminist groups who are against pornography. Kamener attributes the Satanic Panic to the convergence of three cultural forces: the recovery movement, feminism, and the Christian right. Kamener suggests that, in part, the hysteria represented cultural resistance to women's liberation and changing gender roles. The daycare providers that became the target of SRA accusations were enabling women to have careers. Yet, paradoxically, the feminist movement was particularly susceptible to the Satanic Panic. 126 feminists supported accusations of SRA in solidarity with the support of rape victims. A strange alliance seems to have formed between feminists and the Christian right. Both groups were opposed to pornography, and Satanic Panic linked this issue to far darker and larger social problems, which we will later discuss. But first, I would love to talk about my favorite satanic terminology, which is lesser magic. And I use lesser magic every day. You guys probably do too, for whatever reasons, to persuade somebody to your will to do something that is favorable to you. Lesser magic, however, is rooted in the Art of Seduction, and it is umbrellaed under the left-hand path philosophy, where lesser magic is a guiding principle to attain a desired outcome. Satanic feminism also facilitates the establishment of firm guidelines pertaining to the worker's boundaries, because a satanic feminist sex worker is always in control of her surroundings, even when her client has been misled into believing otherwise. So, back to Wollstonecraft, she wrote that, taught from their infancy that beauty is a woman's scepter, the mind shapes itself to the body, and roaming round its gilt cage only seeks to adorn its prison. She implies that without the encouragement young women receive from an early age to focus their attention on beauty and outward accomplishments, women could achieve much more. So we play, sex workers do, we play on that role of the innocent Eve. A sex worker is discouraged basically from showing her customer how intelligent she truly is, because a man going into an establishment like that doesn't want a woman to be her equal. They're looking for entertainment, and usually a more submissive dancer or sex worker is more appealing to them. And it plays into that role where we're being the subservient. Which leads me to this popular concept in the base teachings, the use of lesser magic and the role of the femme fatale. As we know, the femme fatale is the epitome of a sexual, liberated woman. You know, her hair, her makeup, the way she smells, every one of the senses is tickled in some way for the person that there is a subject of a lesser magic to get a better response. So, I took a quote from Magistra Peggy Nadramia from the Church of Satan. And she writes about lesser magic. Lesser magic is about changing the thoughts and feelings of others through direct manipulation so that they will work to your will. Lesser magic involves less ritualistic magic, psychology, and any other knowledge the witch has available to stack the odds in her favor. What woman has never occasionally used her looks, a winning smile, a flash of the eye, to help get what she wants from time to time? What man hasn't sometimes used his stature, speed, or strength to nudge rivals out of the way? What person wouldn't use her knowledge, skills, and abilities to get a better deal, a better job, a better house, or even a better lover or partner from time to time? As a matter of personal choice, though, Satanists should choose not to manipulate or take advantage of people who are disadvantaged by age, disability, or circumstances beyond their control. Therefore, we should not use lesser magic against children, old people, physically or mentally ill people, or people in conditions of poverty. For LaVey, sexuality, as well as other natural appetites, should not be denied, but must be satisfied in accordance with one of the prevailing mantras of Satanism: indulgence, not compulsion, as well as the establishment of consent, which is extremely important for us, the sex worker. Establishing of consent is basically everything. It shows the customer the proper etiquette, how to treat the dancer, and in turn, it provides a more safe work environment. So, lesser magic, it is a satanic term, but it's not necessarily ingrained in Satanism. There's a lot of science behind it too. Let me introduce to you Dr. Robert Cialdini. I loved his work because basically he says influencing others isn't luck or magic, it's science. There are proven ways to help make you more successful as a marketer and as an office politician. People's ability to understand the factors that affect their behavior are surprisingly poor. So of these things, we have reciprocation, which recognizes that people feel indebted to those who do something for them or give them a gift. Social proof, when people are uncertain about a course of action, they tend to look to those around them to guide their decisions and actions. Commitment and consistency, people do not like to back out of deals. Liking, people are more likely to favor those who are physically attractive, similar to themselves, or give them compliments. This is incredibly important for the sex worker. You approach a customer and you try to see what it is they're looking for. Are they a dominant male that would like another dominant female to be their equal? Usually not. They want a subservient. You have a submissive customer. They would like a dominant dancer. So as a sex worker, it's all about changing your role in accordance to who you are serving. Let's go on. Authority. People respect authority. They want to follow the lead of real experts. And scarcity. Basically, the lesser there is of something, the more valuable it is. So as a satanic feminist sex worker who dresses alternative, it attracts the attention from the customer to me, as opposed to, say, somebody who doesn't really have that much flair, looks like everybody else. So being able to stand out is extremely important as a sex worker. Another science-based, I suppose, book is The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. And basically, it's just a book about for pickup artists. You must learn to stir people's curiosity. Becoming more personable with your clients. Telling them a little bit about your life, exuding confidence. These are all things that attract a customer to the sex worker, and in turn also, can be applied to your romantic life. You can seduce a partner, or otherwise. But yeah. Cool. So when talking about sex work, there are usually two ideas that go behind it. One, it is a form of self-expression. Women or men use sex work as a way to liberate themselves sexually and take ownership of their sexuality. The other idea is that sex work is a form of exploitation, and it is detrimental to the women's movement. The hypocrisy of publicly oppressing sex workers while enjoying the fruits of the industry behind closed doors is still alive and well to this day. And while society would like to portray a sex worker as a broken and beat down woman, most women within the industry find their occupation as a form of self-empowerment. So, as a sex worker, we find ourselves stuck between a rock and a hard place. And I will bring the free the nipple movement as an example. On one hand, sex workers find sexuality as an empowering form of visual art. Sexuality does not discriminate based on age, gender, creed, nationality, and it should be available for everybody to enjoy if they so choose. Today, feminists lobby for equal treatment when it comes to women going topless out in public. We want to normalize the nipple in hopes that men will understand that we are still not asking for it, despite how little clothing we may be wearing. On the other hand, sex workers take opportunity of this archaic notion. We monetize on it. We monetize on the fact that nipples and sexuality are still taboo. So it's kind of, we are stuck between a rock and a hard place. We do not want to hinder the women's movement to normalize our sexuality, but at the same time, we also monetize on it, and we will continue to be opportunistic in this sense as long as we can. Which leads me to say some anti-porn feminists would argue that sex workers are a detriment to normalizing female sexuality. But I would like to debate otherwise. As I stated earlier, the significance of consent is extremely important. As we are opportunistic in the current state, we are also asserting ourselves and teaching customers the proper etiquette when they come into our establishment. So, being a 12-year dancer already, we get a new crop of baby strippers every year. They have no idea what they're doing. They give a dance, and they don't know how to put their foot down. Guys start groping them, you see this look of absolute terror on their face, and they don't know what to do. I pull them aside and let them know that you did not consent to their hands, so you need to put your foot down, because otherwise who will tell them? Nobody else is going to tell them but you. And so it's extremely important to be vocal and to give the proper consent to your clients. Which, with enough trust and rapport built up with these clients, boundaries can be stretched a little bit, and you can even have a little bit more of a fun session with the sex worker that you're getting services from, which can lead to role playing, which is a lot of fun. A lot of men don't know how to be open about whatever fetishes or kinks they may have unless they are with somebody who does it for a living. I would like to quote one of the OGs of the Satanic Temple. Her name is Mercy Melissa. And I loved one of her quotes from one of her blogs that she wrote because she attributed sex work akin to being a healer. And this is how. I never imagined how related the two could be. Though there are a lot of stigmas about sex workers and their clients, this is part of a much larger issue in which people feel guilty or ashamed about natural urges and sexuality. I am proud to be someone who helps alleviate all of that, if only for a moment. And it's incredibly true. I can't tell you how many men come in not even interested in objectifying me, but they want to release whatever tension or whatever stresses they had that week, and they cry. I've had men cry. I've had men pour their hearts out to me, and I've even had men tell me that I've helped them through some really hard time in their lives. So it's incredibly endearing to know that a sex worker can be not just an object of lust, but can also be a healer to somebody who is struggling emotionally. Another reason I would suggest that sex work is not detrimental to the women's movement is that women are dominating the adult entertainment industry. We have household names such as Jenna Jameson, Stormy Daniels, Candida Royale. They are all former porn stars that turned directors and entrepreneurs. They are making porn for women. And it's incredible to see that it's not just a male-dominated industry as I would like you to think. Despite this fact that women are indeed dominating the adult entertainment industry, there is an evident war on female sex workers. The anti-porn feminists use a legal and moral cover to target sex work under the banner of fighting trafficking. They are basically saying that prostitution is paid rape, which given the fact that, we are giving consent to do this, it's incredibly insulting that somebody would say that. Some activists, some anti-porn activists, view calling the cops to rescue these people from the sex trade as a model, as the model of a successful human rights intervention. They don't count their victories by the number of people they help, but rather by the arrests that are made. Sex worker activists have long voiced this concern, not to protect the sex industry, as anti-prostitution campaigners claim, but to protect themselves from the violence of arrests and the violence that results from widespread social stigma and discrimination. Defenders of sex workers' rights want to stop those arrests, while the feminists who should be their natural allies are pushing for more. Which leads me to the curious case of Rhode Island. In 1980, lawmakers revised the state statute on prostitution. They were concerned that it was overly broad and could infringe on First Amendment freedoms. They went too far and accidentally removed the section defining the act itself as a crime. Street solicitation was still a misdemeanor, but indoor prostitution was technically legal. That wasn't a huge issue back then, since most prostitution occurred outdoors and internet wasn't very popular back then. Other associated activities such as street walking, pimping, and trafficking remained illegal. But everything kind of changed once the internet started becoming more popular. You would start seeing businesses, massage parlors that would hire sex workers. And they were popping up everywhere, all over Rhode Island. So this statewide incidence of gonorrhea among women declined by 39%, and the number of rapes reported to police in the state declined by 31%, according to the paper. On November 3rd, 2009, the Rhode Island governor made the act for paying for sex illegal again after he signed a bill that banned indoor prostitution immediately. How unfortunate that, there was actual science and statistics to support that prostitution was bringing down STDs, violence, rape cases, but, they still consider it immoral and made it illegal again. So there was a study by Baylor University in Los Angeles, which contributes to an impassioned, long-running debate about prostitution among advocates for women's rights. Their work appears to be the first quantitative evidence that removing criminal penalties for prostitutes can reduce violence against women and curtail sexually transmitted infections in society generally and dramatically so. Yet opponents argue that legal prostitution would encourage traffickers to kidnap women and girls into lives of sexual slavery. There are a number of reasons to think that making prostitution legal might improve working conditions for prostitutes. If they were having a problem with a client, they could threaten to call the police. Not only could this threat reduce the risk of physical violence, but it could also allow them to demand their clients to use condoms. And as a dancer, the reason I titled the previous slide as compartmentalize and capitalize is that, the sex work industry is completely muddled and it's gray and overlapping right now. You have men coming into strip clubs looking for a little more than just a lap dance. Incredibly frustrating. And I personally would like to see prostitution made legal so this gray area are separated. You have a brothel, you have a strip club, go to which one whatever services you want to get. But don't come to a strip club asking for a prostitute, because that's not who we are. And it almost influences the dancers to go that extra mile because they're being pressured by men to do so. So I personally would like to see the compartmentalization to happen. Robert Weitzer, a sociologist at George Washington University, disagreed with the anti-pornography activists and the anti-prostitution activists. He argued that legal prostitution would reduce the financial incentive for organized crime to risk running afoul of law enforcement by kidnapping and transporting girls. When something is prohibited, it allows organized crime to gain foothold. He compared the sex market to the markets for alcohol during Prohibition or for marijuana and other drugs today, which is incredibly true. Imagine all the revenue we could get if we legalized prostitution. Just from marijuana. You could see a drug that was prohibited, and it made it easy for the cartels to, capitalize on it and created crime because of the drug rings. Well, Colorado doesn't have that anymore, and they're making lots of money because of it. And just imagine what we could do if we were to get rid of these archaic beliefs that sexuality and prostitution are immoral. We could really make a difference with all that extra tax money. And as always, as Satanists, responsible indulgence, not compulsion. By legalizing prostitution, people wouldn't be inclined to do immoral acts. Let's see. So, in conclusion, Satanic feminism encourages sexual liberation and body autonomy. Also, as a Satanist, we are opportunistic in whatever gifts are bestowed upon us and whatever opportunities may arise. I would like to quote Mercy Melissa again, because she said it best. No one understands better how negative stigma fueled by religious persecution clouds perception and the importance of brandishing a pseudonym because of it. It is still considered helpful to society, for the most part, to suppress sex workers and Satanists on stigma alone, without feeling the need to investigate further and shatter their false perspective. Hell hath no fury like a witch hunt meant for a supposed slut or a Satanist. Try being both. Thank you. Open to questions. Go ahead.
How did you enter into the sex work industry?
I entered into the sex worker industry right out of high school. I applied for a job at the only club in Tucson that would allow an 18-year-old to work there. And in Arizona, our laws are, every state is different. Arizona, you can have alcohol, but it has to be a topless club, or you can have a fully nude club with no alcohol. So there's one fully nude club in Tucson, so I decided to work there because it was the only club I was of legal age to work at. And I managed to stay there for 12 years because the rules there are more strict than any of the topless clubs I've ever worked at. They actually enforce the no touching rule. Because we are naked, we can be easily penetrated with a finger in a split second. So the rules are extremely no hands at all times. And I managed to stay there. It was good money. I managed to get my degree and put myself through college. And it's led me to live a comfortable life. So I'm going to continue doing it as long as I'm able to do so. Yes.
Has being openly a Satanist affected your work there?
My work has not been affected from being a Satanist. Most people don't really know who I am as a person outside of there. So, that's why it's important to use pseudonyms as a dancer. You have your persona that you created. We always get asked, well, what's your real name? Well, the whole reason we have a pseudonym is to protect from creepy guys like you. So, I'm not going to tell you my real names. But after we first got popular for that invocation campaign that went on the news, I had a couple of customers come in to tell me they saw me on TV. So they knew who I was already prior to being on TV. So it was kind of, oh, we saw you there. It hasn't really affected me at all. But it did affect my modeling. Modeling was, I do go by my my actual name on Facebook, and a lot of photographers did not like my involvement with the Satanic Temple, and they started noticing that I was getting less requests for photo shoots, and eventually I just decided just to give up modeling completely to focus on TST.
Is there any advice you would give to a new, as someone with 12 years of experience, what would you say to, say, brand new baby Michelle?
What I would say to a brand new baby stripper?
Yes.
It's important to brand yourself, make yourself stand out from the rest of the crowd, have a gimmick. I miss the days back in the late 80s, early 90s where erotic dancers would come out with a set. They would have a chair, an outfit, and a theme to go with it. And that's not very common these days anymore. It's more just like you go up there and you just shake it. The dancers that actually have a theme and a gimmick, they do much better because they stand out and they're memorable. So that's one of the most important things, to be memorable and to be assertive. Set your boundaries, or they will, you give them an inch and they'll take a mile.
So Nathan asked, you mentioned not using lesser magic on the disadvantaged. Do you consider it immoral at all?
To use lesser magic on customers?
Yeah.
Absolutely not. Using lesser magic, that is just our term for the art of seduction or the art of persuasion. I'm pretty sure Nathan himself may use, the art of seduction in daily lives. You got lawyers. They use the art of persuasion to make their case. So it's not technically immoral because you're not taking that person's right to choose. They still have full autonomy over their decision. You're just making one decision be more appealing than another. Go ahead.
So I was seeing some things online, and so I know it's there. I was wondering if you had a psychological theory or commentary about people who object to what you do because they say it's morally reprehensible, but as a corrective measure offer to rape you.
So what's the question?
Do you have any psychological theory about that or commentary regarding those kinds of comments I know you receive?
Oh, sure. Well, there are plenty of men who would criticize my choice of being a dancer, yet, they will try to force themselves upon me. And it's mostly it's a power game. Whenever a customer comes in, they come in with a certain air where they feel like they're in control and they're the ones who are making decisions because they have the money. But that is just a facade that we let them have. We are in complete control. We choose whether or not we give you a dance. And it's always going to be a power play between dancers and the men that come see us. They want to feel superior to us. And so the only way they could really do that is by using their stature, their weight, their manliness to overpower us. So that's my interpretation.
Just a comment, I really enjoyed the analogy of legalizing weed to legalizing prostitution. I lived in Colorado and I've lived in Washington, and with a huge opium epidemic, they saw that when they legalized it, it dropped as much as 30%. In many of the cities, no other corrective means, measures, illegalization actually did that, besides legalizing weed. And over $100 million was able to go back to the school system. Also something that no other means and methods was able to do. So, awesome analogy.
Excellent observation, yeah.
Keely asked, as a sex worker, do you see any kind of light at the end of the tunnel for the destigmatization of the profession?
No, I don't. I don't. It kind of relies on being a social stigma in a way. Like there's always, you have the feminists who want to normalize the nipple, but that's in a certain context. You're outside, you're not in that role. So for a sex worker, we have to place ourselves in that role to be lusted after. Otherwise, we would just call ourselves therapists.
Over the last, a little bit longer, but it's been a lot more intense in the last 10, 15 years, the sort of normalization of sex workers and sex workers becoming celebrities outside of, everybody knows who Jenna Jameson is, and, Pamela Anderson blew up when her sex tape got out. Kim Kardashian is famous because, she got peed on or whatever happened. But if you noticed at all, this sort of piggybacks on the last question, like, are you being treated any differently, or is there not less of a stigma, but are there women more open to you as a sex worker in the last few years because of that because of sex work becoming more mainstream, not necessarily more accepted, but more prevalent?
I would say, and you're talking about other women?
Other women, yeah. There are pole dancing classes now. Like, are girls more apt to talk to you about it rather than to just sort of walk away from the stripper?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, there are the women that are totally okay with it and that come to enjoy it. But then there's also, like you mentioned, pole dancing classes. You have women who take those classes, but they have to stress, I'm not a stripper, I just do pole dancing. So it's almost like, they're ashamed to be associated with that at all. So yes and no, there's always good and bad for everything. Women, who are in complete support and they don't mind and they, power to you, girl. And then there's women who, I was saying the lecture, they see it as a hindrance to the women's movement because we're basically making ourselves objects for men.
What do you feel is the critical element that separates sort of this general trend of feminism from specifically satanic feminism? What is the extra oomph that makes that moniker?
Extra oomph that differentiates feminism or satanic feminism.
Yes.
It's hard to pinpoint. I'd say it would be the acknowledgement of using lesser magic and knowing that you're in a way trying to influence the customer, and also it's a good question. I don't know how I'm going to answer that. Lesser magic is definitely a big part of it, and as a Satanist, you're attributing all the things that you do to your actions and your behavior. So that's the best answer I can give you.
I really like your kind of use of lesser magic as this sort of satanic feminist tool, just because I've seen it. I kind of wish you would elaborate on lesser magic as a feminist tool, if anything comes to mind, just because I have heard so much theory about higher magic, and I'm seeing the trend of higher magic being a masculine, that it makes sense that they would go with feminism. So that might have been a long shot question.
Okay. Well, the greater magic is more ritualistic and based on ritualistic and based in the occult. With lesser magic, a lot of it is, I took a lot of it from the Satanic Witch, where it basically has a diagram of, certain types of men, and there's, really masculine men look for submissive women, really submissive men look for feminine, or submissive men look for assertive women. So as a satanic feminist approaching a customer, you gauge, their behavior, the way they're acting, you watch them, you view how, they're acting within the establishment, and you try to complement what it is they're exuding. So, you got a big dude bro that, lifts a lot of weight. That guy is probably not going to like an assertive woman. So I come over to him and I play with psychology. I come over very meek, very ditzy. I play into the woman I feel he would be most attracted to. And same goes to submissive man. I come very domineering, very, assertive, and you just play on what you think it is that they're looking for. Ash?
Nothing else?
Do you ever feel like you get any clients or people that come in that are feminists? Like, do you ever feel like you're getting it from the other side too?
Sure. I mean, not every guy that walks in through the door is a misogynistic jerk. Like, there's plenty of men who go into the establishment who truly appreciate the beauty of woman. But then you get a lot of men that have the hero complex. They see us as broken women that need saving. So they come in trying to, save us from our fate. Like, you really don't need to be doing this, honey. So it's like, it's extremely condescending. Like, they mean well, but, they act as if we don't want to be there. So we do get feminist men as well. And those are the ones I prefer.